Thank you for tuning in to Horner's Church today. Today we're going to begin a new study on the miracles of Jesus as contained in the Gospel of John. The first miracle, of course, is the miracle of turning the water into wine at the wedding of Cana. I look forward to how this unfolds. Hope you'll join in for the entire series. God bless you. Thanks again for tuning in. John 2, on the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus said to his disciples, had also been invited to the wedding. Jesus and his disciples had been invited. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They had no more wine." He responds, "Dear one, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial cleansing, each one holding about 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to his servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. And then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tested the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you have saved the best until now." This is the first miraculous sign Jesus performed in Cana of Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Wow, the best for last. A number of years ago, I was probably 30 years old. I was invited to a fundraiser for a society that we would all recognize that name. And Cheryl and I got there. I had no idea what I was getting into. But I wanted to be a good neighbor. My neighbor invited me to go, so I went. And there was wine on every table, and it was expensive. And people were drinking it left and right. I was not. Cheryl was not. And before long, you could tell the dynamics were changing in the room. They were drinking a lot of wine. And there was a lot of talking under the influence, I might add. And then they brought out the stuff in cardboard boxes. And people didn't know the difference. Well, this is exactly the opposite of that culturally here. We see in this miracle. But the miracle is, we need to understand the context of this miracle. What was the first miracle that Moses did when he went before Pharaoh? You remember that? He turned the water into blood. And Jesus is actually connecting the dots here with Moses when he does this miracle. He's actually saying to those who are present, and they get it, I am the one that falls in the prophecies that Moses had about me coming. And they get that. And they understood that. Well, the miracle that Moses did connects the people there with the law of Moses. The miracle that Jesus does here connects them with life. The miracle that Moses did connects them with death. The miracle that Moses did connects them with all that is bad. And Jesus here connects them with all that is good. In fact, when Jesus does the Last Supper, he says, "I'll not celebrate it again until I celebrate it in heaven with you." The miracle of turning the water into wine is a significant event in that it starts to prove, as the Gospel of John does, the Gospel of John was written for the purpose of demonstrating that Jesus is God. And what greater way to start than with this miracle? He's not only saying I'm God, he's saying I'm also fulfilling what Moses had promised before. And the Orthodox Jews get that almost immediately. Well, he attends this. It's a very common event, a wedding. Now, the way the weddings worked in that day are different, obviously, than today. I can only imagine what it would cost to do a wedding today the way they did weddings back then. It was a 7-day feast is what it was. And what they would do is they would, in this event, and it's interesting too, this miracle takes place in Cana, right, of Galilee. 90% of Jesus' miracles take place in Capernaum, which is a heavily Gentile area. And in Capernaum, he quickly tells people, don't brag about this miracle, because his time has not yet come. And when he says his time has not yet come, he's speaking of what? The cross. He attends a common event with his disciples on the third day, again significant, third day, resurrection. A wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. And when I say third day, it's important to understand that Jews in that day valued numbers big time. They heard numbers loud and clear as being symbols. We don't see that today, really, do we? I don't think many of us see that way. Like, for instance, the number 7 is the number of completion. God rested on the seventh day. It was complete. Anyway, the common event takes place in Cana, and Jesus' mother's there, and of course it says here, and his disciples have been invited to this wedding. Well, the point here is that Jesus starts his earthly ministry, his first miracle, in the presence of everyday people. Well, it's a common event. And my next point is he publicly embraces his mother and hints at his purpose. Understanding this, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Now, again, the significance of this is that event is so important in the life of a Jewish family that had they run out of wine with no provision for more wine, the married couple would have suffered disrespect for the rest of their lives. It's that big a deal. Now, we don't understand that, right? We don't know anyone that holds a grudge, do we? You're talking about holding a grudge. In fact, these Jewish people in Cana, this couple would have never lived this down. It's the ultimate in faux pas. And when the wine's gone, we have no more wine. And Jesus says, "Dear woman." Now, I've heard so many mistakes about this phrase, "dear woman." I want to clarify. He's not being disrespectful of his mother. This is a common greeting that would occur back in that day. Not unlike me walking up to Bowie and saying, "Hey, brother, how you doing?" I'm not being disrespectful because I'm not calling your name. And that's true here too. And I've heard people say he's being misogynist or whatever. That's just not true. It's very common for people. In fact, the fact that he called her a dear woman is significant that he values her. He didn't just say woman, which would have been okay. He said, "Dear woman." And then, why do you involve me? And again, that's more of a rhetorical question than anything else. Why are you involving me? This is not my job. Now, I've heard people say, I've hired people before in my churches that said, when we asked them to go set up tables and chairs in the fellowship hall, that's not my job. That's not what he's saying here. What he's saying here is, this is not the purpose for which I came. My time has not yet come. And that's a Jewish idiom, if you will, or phrase that speaks of the cross that's about to be unveiled in 3 years. He embraces his mother and he hints at his purpose. Now, again, throughout the life of Jesus, he doesn't automatically come out publicly early on and say, "I'm going to go to Jerusalem to die." He says it in a different way, more subtle way. He says, I'm headed to Jerusalem. That's again a Jewish idiom for "I'm going there to die." The point here with this is he is saying, my time has not yet come. And that's a significant statement. It tells you that, first of all, it tells you he understands his role. He understands why he came, right? It's not a surprise to him. And it's important to understand that he recognizes that that he's not come yet. Now, he reveals the faith of his mother and surrenders to her authority. You know, think about that. If he's a misogynist, why would his mother get away with saying this to him? He's certainly not a misogynist at all. He affirms her faith. He reveals the faith of his mother and he surrenders to it. He says, his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to do." That's a significant statement as well. He's saying to everybody there, I have come to do the Father's will, and I'm going to surrender and do what my mama asked me to do. Again, that's a significant statement. It reveals the faith of his mother. Now, again, let me just, with all due respect, Mary was not a perpetual virgin. She had other children, and Joseph was the biological father of those other children. And we need to be clear about that. And the fact that she has this authority over Jesus does not mean anything beyond this setting, if you will. Well, once again, he cleanses the unclean. Now think about this again. Jesus often uses the ordinary to accomplish the superordinary. Is that true? He does. Now think about this as well. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. What is a ceremonial washing deal? There's a lot of water here. Perhaps as much as 180 gallons or more. And the ceremonial cleansing that he does, that they would do, is they would wash their hands and their face and sometimes their feet before they would enter into sacred territory. And a wedding like this is pretty sacred. As a matter of fact, I've wrestled with, and I don't know how far to go with this, I've also wondered if we should not add marriage and weddings as a sacrament. It's that holy. It's that significant of an event. And here is Jesus. Now think about this. He takes that which is dirty. These pots are not clean. They put water in these pots, and he declares them clean by turning that water into wine. And I've had many people ask me, was this water into wine? Was there alcohol in this wine? Yeah, there's alcohol. It certainly had to be. Now, again, I don't want to build a sermon around this, but the point is, even on the day of Pentecost, remember the day of Pentecost, when Peter is accused of being drunk, what does he say? It's too early in the day for that. He doesn't say, I don't drink. It's too early in the day for that, right? And the point here is it doesn't matter about this, except that most scholars would say, that I've read, would say that this wine certainly had alcohol in it, but it was not boosted alcohol. They didn't enhance it in any way. It was natural. And it would have had to have had alcohol in it for it to be used in this wedding setting. But most of the scholars I've read say that you could not drink enough of this to get drunk. Your body couldn't hold enough. It was that mild of alcohol. He fills these up. They fill them up to the brim. And everything is copacetic, if you will. Well, he solves the immediate problem. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. The master of the banquet was a significant player in this wedding. He was the host person that had oversight of all these dealings. And not only would the bride and groom have been shamed for the rest of their lives had they not had this wine, the master of the banquet would have been shamed as well. They did what he said, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Again, this miracle that is done was not done with fanfare. A very quiet miracle. And he did not realize where it had come from. Then the servants, but they knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests had too much to drink. Now, that's why you have to say it had alcohol in it, right? But you have saved the best until now. Once again, this probably speaks of the miracle of the continuation of the theme of Jesus through the Old Testament. They've saved the very best until now. That's the role. He solves the immediate problem. Now, again, I'm going to go through some other things I think are important here, but it's important to realize that Jesus always had his one, if you will, one ear to the ground of the human need around him and one ear to eternity. He never shortchanged on either of those perspectives. I frequently get accused of beating up the United Methodist Church, and I'm going to go ahead and run the risk again of saying this. I served in a district where I heard the bishop say, we don't want to do Operation Christmas Child because it's too evangelical. And they charge a fee to do that. I want to brag on Cheryl and Nicole. there are over 200 Operation Christmas Child boxes in the parsonage waiting to be taken out. They do it every year. And hopefully we can jump on board and do another 75 or 80 right here. We need to do that. But I know. The point here is understanding immediate human need is a valuable tool in our understanding what the gospel is all about. One without the other is empty. If you just get on the street corner and preach, nobody's going to listen. You earn the right to have a witness in the community by the good things you do in the community, in my opinion. Well, what he does, he affirms Moses and the disciples believe. Now, think about this. The first of the miraculous signs Jesus performed in Cana in Galilee, he thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Now, I would have thought they'd already taken care of that, right? Because they dropped their nets and they followed him. But what he's saying here is not that they're now believers. What he's saying is they trusted Jesus completely after this miracle. Now, there's a difference, I've said many times, in being a believer and being a disciple. You can be a believer and not be a disciple, but you can't be a disciple and not be a believer. And it's important to understand that. And Jesus is saying that Moses had authority over me, and I surrendered to Moses by doing this miracle after the pattern of Moses in the Old Testament, and it had a powerful impact on the disciples. Here's the so what, right? So what? I can find opportunities in common places. That is so important. Opportunities come our way, and often we miss them. They go right by us. They go by me as well. Finding opportunities in common places. Wow. I can find meaning and purpose in common places. Sometimes we look for the big, right? We look for the explosive. We look for the magnanimous stuff out there, right? But God whispers to us as often in a very small, quiet voice. And I can find meaning and purpose in those common places. A proverb says, a timely word spoken is more valuable than silver or gold. And boy, does our culture need some kindness today. Is that true? How many of us are fearful of being kind to someone we don't know when we're out somewhere in public? You know, we just find ourselves paralyzed often. Kindness always is okay. My next point is I can find comfort by surrendering completely. See, Jesus surrendered to the prerogative of his mother. Think about that. And God calls you and I to surrender. Romans 12:1 and 2 says, I beseech you by the mercies of God that you present your bodies a living sacrifice unto God, holy and acceptable unto God. Holy and acceptable. God doesn't want part of our lives. He wants everything. He wants all of us. I can find joy with the cleansing of my life. Those pots had to be cleaned. Now, I'm not a good pot scrubber. Cheryl doesn't want me doing much. I love it. She doesn't like me doing dishes. And I enjoy not doing them. And part of the reason that she doesn't like me in her kitchen for that purpose is I don't do them the same way she does them. I do them better, I might add. You're right. But the point is this. Heaven rejoices when a person is set free. Is that true? And people around us are living in bondage. What are folks around us in bondage to? Everything from social media to whatever, right? A lot of bondage. I can find peace by trusting in his timing. I can only imagine the MC of this event, what he was sweating. I'm not a good one to talk. I tell you what, I get all fretful and all concerned and all. I take the reins way too often. Anybody like that take the reins too often? I told you about driving the bus. I taught 6th grade. We won a prize. We sold the most little candy bars. Those little used to be $1 now. I don't know what they are now. Who are they? What's the brand? David, what's the brand of those candy bars? You're an educator.
World's Finest Chocolate.
World's Finest. That's right. We won the contest, and the prize was we got to go to King's Dominion. I had to drive the bus. And after about 15 minutes, the power steering on that bus died. So I'm headed up the highway, driving a bus with no power steering. And by the time I got to King's Dominion, I was almost locked in this position. That's a great metaphor for how things can go when we try to take charge. Well, so what? Thank you for tuning in to Horns Methodist Church today. I hope this message on Jesus turning the water into wine was beneficial. If you'd like to talk about this message or anything else related to your spiritual journey, feel free to give us a call at 252-237-4616. We'll be glad to talk with you about this or anything else related to your spiritual journey. God bless you and have a great week.